All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Giovanni Onwuchekwa, and I'd like to welcome you to the Federal Digital Experience Industry Day. I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer for Acquisitions within GSA's IT category. And this event is going to be the first in a series of conversations we have with industry about the path forward with improving the federal digital experience. Today, we have an exciting lineup of speakers who are all blazing a trail in the federal DX space. First, you're going to hear from GSA Administrator Robin Carnahan, who's going to share some opening remarks and really set the stage for us. Then you're going to hear from Federal CIO Claire Maturana, who is going to give us a big picture outlook for the federal DX space. And then you're going to hear from Jonathan Finch, who is the Director of Digital Experience at the Office of Management and Budget. And he's going to give us an overview of the recent M2322 policy. And then after that, you're going to hear from two panels of agency leaders who are at the forefront of DX in government. First, you're going to hear from a panel that's going to share insights about agencies' current needs and where things are headed in the DX space. And then the second panel is going to share insights and lessons learned from agencies that have already implemented digital experience programs. And you're also going to hear some best practices and lessons learned about acquisitions to support those programs. And then finally, I will wrap up the event. And so that's essentially the agenda we're working with today. Now, before I invite Administrator Carnahan up to speak, I do have a few housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded, and if you do not consent to being recorded, then you may exit at this time. Closed captions are available through the captions feature in the Zoom and via the link that has just been shared in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robin Carnahan to get us started.
Well, thank you very much, Giovanni, and glad to be here with Claire and Jonathan and so many of our government and industry partners. I really appreciate y'all being here. It is, we're here because we're like-minded folks. We're all committed to figuring out how to transform government service delivery in this digital age. And I just got to encourage everybody as we get started to just stop and think back a little bit about just how far we have come in the last 20 years or so. Back then we dreamed of a moment like this when we could really harness technology to deliver better for the people that we're serving. I will never forget, just about 20 years ago, I was first elected as Secretary of State in my home state of Missouri. And I remember the first day I walked into the office and there were more people like manually opening envelopes and depositing checks to renew their annual business licenses than we had in our entire IT department. There were probably 3 times as many people doing that. Well, even the time I was in that office, things changed dramatically, but certainly in the last 20 years, we've gotten to a point where now we've got both the computing and human capacity to not just collect and analyze this data, but to then apply those learnings to make government work better, faster, and cheaper for folks. I often say that government at its core is a service delivery business, really. And we've got 300 million people who turn to us at some point in their lives, and they expect great service. So when I talk about making the damn websites work, I'm not just talking about technology. I'm talking about public trust in government, and really trust in our democracy's ability to deliver. We not only have to keep up with the speed of all this fast changing technology, we have to do it in a way that remains true to our values as a democracy. So really the challenge of this moment is, how do we navigate that tension between moving fast while continuing to protect our shared values? Well, to me, meeting the moment, it's just as crystal clear. We've got to first start with values. What is it we want to protect? I can sum that up really in 3 words. So secure, accessible, and responsible. So when I talk about security, what I really mean is that we're focusing on protecting people, their privacy, their data, but also protecting our processes, our systems, and our country's national security. And when we talk about accessible, it really means that in a democracy, in our country, it's our job to serve everyone. So it's not just technologies for a few. These have to be tools that are equitable and easy to use and serve everyone. And then responsible. That means in government, when we use emerging technologies, those deployments have to not just be ethical and legal, they also need to be transparent and accountable about how we're using data. What are those data sources? What is the data quality? What are the data models? All of that matters for us. So when we think about all of this, it seems like a big deal, but really it isn't. These values are not new. These are things that we've heard about, read about, seen, and been practicing for a long time. The executive order on AI talks about these same values. The IDEA Act talks about them. Certainly the president's management agenda. That's all of what's been driving us throughout this administration. These are how we expect to operate in government, but how we expect our industry partners to operate as well. So let's just talk for a second about what we're doing, how we're applying some of these values, and also delivering great service. Main thing is we're centering everything on people, finding ways to ensure that technology is an enabler, force multiplier. We want it to optimize government so it's better and more accessible. We know that obviously the world's changing really fast, and folks expect their online services to be digital products that are simple and personalized and easy to use, whether it's a website or a form, whether it's some kind of signing up for an electronic benefit or competing for a government contract. We know too that AI is only going to increase expectations about how all that stuff works. So let me just give you 3 quick examples of things that we think are worth noticing and investing in even more. The first, of course, is the US web design system. I'm sure most of you have heard about that. It's our free open source platform. It's already helping 91 different agencies design their websites to make sure they're accessible and mobile friendly and easy to use. Over 500 government websites use it now, and it gets over 1 billion page views every year. This is all like a common language. It's focused on human-centered design, and it works for everyone. So I bring that up because I want folks in industry to take a look at that US web design system, and we want that to be a part of every single public-facing website, and we want our contracts to include that. So number 2 is Login.gov. You've probably heard of that. It's the single sign-on account for government. And it is just a really important example of how we're using technology for the public good. Y'all know it's been around for several years, and it provides over 50 million Americans with easier access to benefits, whether they're veterans or farmers or students or others. We have designed that from the beginning to be secure, to include 2-factor authentication, to do all of these things that we know are important to prevent fraud, but also guarantee access. Now, the Login.gov is soon going to be piloting facial matching technology to allow people to remotely verify their identities. People want that, and so it's our responsibility to find ways that are consistent to do that with our values, but also minimize data retention, ensure that personal information can never be sold. That's just one example of how we intend to ethically deploy technology in the projects that we're undertaking. The third thing I wanted to mention is the Tech Modernization Fund. Now, we've invested almost $1 billion, or $900 million, into 53 projects, 30 different agencies over the past 6 years. As y'all know, that's a place where agencies can go outside the normal, very long budget cycles that is moving, I always say, at the speed of need. And we can pay out money on more of an iterative basis based on how projects are going rather than big lump sums. We think it is a perfect example to avoid that all too frequent thing we see in government where every agency is reinventing the wheel, because the TMF team has a great view across government about what needs are. We've called on agencies to bring us projects, whether it's supporting the 21st Century IDEA Act, whether it's looking at AI-related proposals. All of those things are important for the TMF and the people that we serve. So that brings us here to this room today. Here's what I think bottom line. We have just got to figure out ways to work together more seamlessly, government and industry, because it's going to take both of us to figure this out. And all of that ends up boiling down to one word: procurement. So, as y'all probably know, GSA is one of the biggest buyers of goods and services anywhere. We buy over $100 billion worth of goods and services for our agency partners every year, and a lot of that is technology related. And we know that companies are rolling out new tech tools faster than ever. Government needs access to those tools. But we also are very clear that it is not always so easy to do business with the government. It can be confusing, it can take a long time. Just this week, I was talking to a former colleague. He advises technology startups, and he told me that, even if a tool that he sees seems perfectly suited for government, he usually advises these startups not to bother. Why? Because it takes too long and it's too expensive to break in. So we're trying to do better. At GSA, we want to be better partners. So here's some of the things that we intend to do and are already doing. First, we want to be more transparent about what we want to buy. We're doing that by working really closely with agencies and with industry partners to develop resources and buying guides that explain what and how we want to buy technology and services. So y'all should take a look at both the 18F de-risking guide. It's online, 18F de-risking guide. It's a focus on custom technology projects. And we just recently, in the last few months, released the IT Category Office's new acquisition resource guide for generative AI and specialized computing infrastructure. It's really, really useful. It's written in plain language, and I hope y'all will check it out. We've gotten a lot of feedback on both of those from CIOs and procurement shops across government. They're relying on the guides. We hope our industry partners are going to get familiar with them and rely on them as well as you prepare proposals. Second thing we're doing, we're committed to really improving FedRAMP. I'll wait and let the applause die down. We know it has to be more scalable, it has to be more secure, it has to get easier to use. And I'm sure that you know that FedRAMP is the first security gate that every cloud product or service has to pass through before being deployed for government use. So if you haven't seen the new FedRAMP roadmap, please take a look at that. We've worked at integrating feedback from industry. We intend to keep listening, to keep iterating, because we know how important it is, not just for government agencies to access the latest cloud services, but also for businesses, small businesses in particular, who are trying to get into the government marketplace. We really want your continued feedback, so please let us know if you think we're on the right track. And then finally, you can expect to see contract language that looks a little different. That's because we're reworking contracts to make them more plain language, to be clear about our expectations, to talk more about outcomes and not just technical requirements that we're interested in. Bottom line is we're shifting toward a more user-focused, agile contracting system, so keep your eyes open for that. But here's what we need from you all to make this real. We need y'all to understand and hear how we're framing these new demand signals. The world is changing. It's no longer for us about a decision between build and buy. It's not an either or. There is another option, and that is blending those choices in thoughtful, innovative ways that really meet our customers' needs. So we need your partnership and your help and your expertise to get that done. The old way of agencies just going out and buying a black box solution that is just never going to keep up in a world where technology is changing this fast. So what we need instead are more products that can connect across government to build that truly seamless digital experience that we're looking for. So in order to do that, we need transparency from you. We need to know and be clear about what you're offering. You need to tell us how data is being used, what security protocols you're relying on, the costs of maintenance. We need our industry partners to use more standardized and open APIs. And let me be clear, this is not about y'all giving up intellectual property. It's about making it easier for us as government to integrate systems that deliver better products and experiences for the people that we serve. We really would like you to bring us demos, not just memos. What does that mean? It means sitting down with us and going through these products together, bringing in actual users, doing testing, creating that feedback loop with the people who are actually using the technology. We need you to give us choices, these kind of feedback loops, and iterate with us. That kind of transparency and those kind of options, whether we need big suites of services or compartmentalized just little components, means we're going to be able to move faster, both to get the contract done, but also to deploy these new technology tools in ways that are secure and effective for the people we serve. It's a win across the board. It's our job, as you know, as government, to be focused on the American people that we serve. They're our stakeholders. That's who we're delivering for. We're stewards of their money. And we want industry partners who feel the same. So I appreciate y'all coming today to hear about these new approaches, but also just to take this unusual moment and figure out how we really can bring to life the possibilities that we only dreamed about 20 years ago, when the promise of this new technology was just getting started. Today, we really can use it to improve people's lives. It is within our reach. It really will take us all working together, hand in hand, and remembering the values that make us different. So thank you all for being our partners in this important work. We look forward to doing even more. So thank you all. And Claire, I don't know if you're on, our CIO. You're up next. Hi, Claire.
Hey, Robin, thank you so much. And foot stomp every single thing. I was over here in my office smiling and cheering on as you were giving your opening remarks. So thank you so much. And thanks to GSA for convening this day, Giovanni and team. So hi, everybody. I'm Claire Martirana, Federal Chief Information Officer. I'm thrilled to be with you all today. I see over 260 participants in this. So what a great showing. So I really want to start off by saying thank you to all of you, not only for participating today, but for being great partners, for really helping our agency digital practitioners, acquisition officials, and so many more folks across our ecosystem. The work that you're doing, and as Robin alluded to, it's evolving every single day, but the needs and expectations of the people we serve are clear. They're providing us with very clear signals as to what they want, because the work that we try to do is all based on human-centered design, listening to our partners, listening to the people we serve, and making sure that we are meeting their needs. So today, I'm here to focus on our digital experience, so DX for short, what we're doing, where we're going, how we can best work across government and industry in support of this collective digital experience journey. But first, I want to talk about what it means when I say federal digital experience and why it's so important. So every year, the United States federal government provides information and services to more than 400 million individuals, families, businesses, and organizations. 400 million is the ecosystem that we are leaning into on a daily basis. And it's incredibly important that we are doing that outreach via digital channels, ranging from websites to chatbots to mobile apps, across that entire digital experience, because digital has become the default. The public wants and expects to interact with the government digitally, and they expect for their digital interactions to be on par with their favorite private sector consumer websites and apps, which means a good customer experience is increasingly meaning a good digital experience. And it's not just about meeting expectations, it's about improving service delivery and the opportunity to improve the lives of millions, making it easier to access the information and services they use and count on every single day. You heard Robin talk about the shared services and resources that are being built at the center of government. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the policies coming from us, including, again, things that Robin mentioned, the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act. Congress gave us the foundation. Through the Biden-Harris administration, we've built on that important foundation. In 2021, the president signed an executive order on transforming federal customer experience. We included customer experience as one of the 3 pillars in the president's management agenda. And then again, last year, our team released 3 flagship policies providing tactical implementation guidance for federal agencies. So in February 2023, the registration and use of .gov domains in the federal government, M2310, is a foundational step to ensure public trust in digital interactions. In September 2023, we published M2322, delivering a digital-first public experience, which set out a bold vision and clear requirements for digital experiences that meet 21st century expectations. In December 2023, we also put out guidance on strengthening digital accessibility, M2408, to ensure that as we continue to strive to be a digital-first government, we do so equitably. With these policies as our guideposts, we're focusing on driving change across these pillars of the key pillars of digital experience. So I'm going to highlight 5 things for you right now. One is we're focused on analytics, because as many of you have heard, numerous people say, you can't manage what you can't measure. So we need better analytics to better optimize digital experiences. We're also focused on accessibility, because as a government, we have an obligation to ensure information and services are accessible to all. Through the use of brand, we can establish greater trust for digital interactions with government. You heard Robin talk about the US web design system. We're continuing to work on that so that you can clearly understand when you're on a government website, and you can move between government websites and have the same visual cues that help you go from place to place. Very essential for us. Something I'm really passionate about. Brand is critical to building back trust. Also, a foundational element is content, right? We communicate through content. Cleaning up and improving that content, making sure that we can ensure the public gets the answers that they need in plain language so that it is accessible to all. And through more consistent design, we can make it easier to navigate our websites. Search boxes shouldn't be in surprising places. They should be in a consistent place. If you're looking for contact information, on the footer of the website should be a clear place that on any government website you can go and find contact information. Because as many of us have said numerous times, we are required to design an omni-channel experience, not a singularly digital experience. We have to meet people where they are. Some people still need to talk to a person on the phone. Some people might still need to or want to go into an office, but we want to make our digital transactions so seamless that those are the exception, not the rule. So the majority of the public gets this information and services through third-party search engines. By adopting search best practices, we can make it way easier for the public to get access to that information. And lastly, through continued digitization, we can make it easier for the public to access services using their preferred medium. Again, as Robin said a little bit earlier, making sure that you give us information once, we safeguard it, we secure it, but that we help you identify opportunities. That is something that the digital experience can actually achieve. So each one of these pillars are whole discussions themselves, and they have different challenges and they require really different solutions. You'll hear more about that from Jonathan Finch, who you'll hear from shortly, but from members of our team. So in collaboration with those key implementation leaders like GSA and our newly established Digital Experience Council, we are working to establish and expand best practices, resources, tools, and standards to help make this journey a little bit easier for our agency colleagues. But speaking to you specifically, our industry partners, here's what we are also counting on you to do. Meet agencies where they are in their respective journeys. You know, some of them are very far along and advanced. Some of them are just starting. And some of these tactics that you're familiar with might be new to them. So meet them where they are, go on the journey with them together. Provide solutions that enable and accelerate digital experience delivery, and help us think through how to be best prepared to tackle the ever-evolving landscape. If some of the things that we're trying to articulate as an agency don't seem quite right to you, please speak up. Have that dialogue with your agency partners, challenge some thinking, bring us along on the journey, help explain to folks that might not totally be getting something, how a solution that you're possibly thinking of or have seen be executed with excellence elsewhere can actually benefit that agency. So today we're not just, focused on improving the acquisition process, but we're certainly going to discuss that. But we're really here to make sure that we're aligned across government and industry, because it's the only way that we can make the progress that we need to make and work together. So throughout the day, you're going to continue to hear more about our guidance and implementation efforts. You'll hear directly from leading voices and practitioners at federal agencies about their own experiences, successes, and challenges, their journeys. And really, we're asking you all to listen closely and continue to think about your own respective opportunity spaces and how you can enable us to move further, faster. And finally, I want to leave you with a call to action. You know, regardless of if you're in industry or you're in government or just a friend of the show, the federal digital experience requires something from all of us, and we all need to step up our game. So let's work together on delivering the experience that the American public can expect and deserves. And this is really an opportunity. I have said this at many industry events in the last year. Read our guidance. This is a 10-year revenue roadmap for you. If you are in the private sector and you're selling goods and services to the federal government, we are trying to outline a clear path forward. So hopefully you can see where your company fits into that environment, where you can participate in that, and where you will have the opportunity to help us deliver for the American people. So thank you all for joining today. I'd like to pass it along to Jonathan Finch from OFCIO to provide you with some more specifics on our recent guidance and ongoing implementation. So thanks so much, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Claire, and to Robin as well for kicking things off. As was mentioned, my name is Jonathan Finch. I'm the Director of Digital Experience in the Office of the Federal CIO and lead the team that was responsible for the development and now implementation of M2322. I'm really excited to be here with you all today, excited that you, our industry partners, are here with us today, and also excited to be here today with so many of my federal colleagues who have really been working tirelessly for many, many years to push this ball up the hill. And we're here today to figure out how can we best support them in doing that. And lastly, as Giovanni mentioned at the start, we hope that this is just the start, the start of more regular and more impactful engagement between government and industry on what hopefully by now is very clear to all of us, a really, really critical topic. Next slide, please. All right, I want to cover two things today, and I promise I will get to the overview of the guidance itself, but I want to start by first talking about what we're collectively building towards. And I think it's really important that we start here, because we're not just looking for partners to help us meet policy requirements, to help us be compliant. We're looking for partners to help realize a vision that I think Claire and Robin really articulated well in their remarks. So I'm going to go through kind of three specific outcomes that we're collectively trying to drive towards through this work. The first outcome that I want to touch on, if we go to the next slide, please, is just digital first, but not digital only. Study after study has shown the increasing preference for digital interactions. But as we all know, whether it be due to access, whether it be due to choice, not everyone is able to or wants to interact with the government digitally. So as we continue to push on being a digital first government, we have to make sure that we're not leaving these folks behind. And perhaps, more importantly, we also need to think about what does that experience look like across channels. The public should be able to start a journey online, pick up the phone if they have to, and jump right back online and finish their journey for a given service or benefit in a seamless fashion. That is what we are driving to when we say digital first, but not digital only government. Next slide. Next thing is just, how do people find information? I imagine this visual will resonate with a lot of folks on the call, whether it's something that you've experienced yourself or perhaps with a member of your family. But today, searching for information about government services or programs, it can feel overwhelming. And so we are building towards an experience where users can, one, easily recognize an official website or digital service. That's something that you heard Claire talk a little bit about and is critically important. Easily find the information they're looking for in what can be a confusing whirlwind of search results. And then lastly, again, on the plain language piece, in language that they can understand, not confusing government jargon or legalese. And put simply, a quote that we've often used to convey this is that the public shouldn't have to know how to know. And I think that really encaptures what we're trying to drive towards here. Next slide. And then lastly, again, today, most of our government websites have a distinct look and feel, and navigating across websites, across agencies, can potentially feel like a bit of a disjointed experience. And so we are building towards being able to deliver a more integrated and a more consistent experience across government, but not just for the sake of consistency, but to make our websites and our digital services easier to navigate and use. And ultimately, we shouldn't be reflecting or forcing our organizational structure on the public. We should be coming across to the public as one government. So a lot there, a lot to unpack, but ultimately, these are three of the critical things that we're building towards as we continue to push on this space. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, that's what we're building towards. I'm now going to use the remainder of my time to do a bit of a walkthrough of the policy itself. If we go to the next slide, I just want to quickly put this up and really hammer home the points around. Please read the policy. We're here today to talk about M2322, our digital experience guidance, but it's really this suite of policies that together serve as the foundation for our digital experience work. So read M2310 if you haven't, read M2322 if you haven't, and read M2408 if you haven't. Claire mentioned that the piece on this being your roadmap. This is our roadmap. This is what our partners across agencies are executing against, and so of course that also means it is your roadmap for how you can best serve them going forward. So next slide, please. All right, so there's a lot to the guidance. There's a lot to M2322, but something that we've found to be helpful is to decompose, if you will, the guidance into its piece parts, into what we've called a set of digital experience pillars. And so I want to just briefly talk through each of these, talk a little bit about what is required or encouraged via the policy, and then just share some thoughts on where and how industry partners might be able to plug in and support. So the first pillar I want to talk about is analytics. The policy itself, it reinforces the requirement to participate in the digital analytics program offered by GSA, and it encourages agencies to collect feedback for each of their web pages, so at the web page level. And what we would ask here is, don't just bring us analytic tools or feedback tools. Help us to also think through and build the capacity to best utilize the data collected via these tools. Help us to incorporate that data into our day-to-day management routines. Next up, we've got accessibility. Critically important topic. There are over 60 million Americans who live with a disability, many of which may rely on assistive technology to access our government websites. And so our policy reinforces both Section 508 standards as well as other global accessibility standards. But I'd say here that this isn't just about testing for accessibility after the fact, though testing is certainly critically important. This is about us being accessible by design and accessible by default. So as you're thinking about the solutions that you're bringing to us at government, ensure that accessibility is front and center and considered early on in that process. Next up, we've got brand. So the two big things here are, one, the use of a .gov domain for all official communications and interactions, as well as the consistent agency branding that you heard Claire talk a little bit about. And so, simply put, if you are hosting a website or a digital service for a federal agency, your platform has to be able to support the usage of the .gov domain. That is just one of the most critical signals that we have to convey trust in interactions between the public and the government. Next up, we've got content. A lot here and a lot to work on. The guidance both reinforces plain language guidelines, and it calls for agencies to take steps to consolidate or remove duplicative content. And so a couple ways that I think industry is suited to plug in here. First of all, bring us tools that enable a deeper, more actionable assessment of plain language beyond just thinking about things like word length or sentence length. Help us to get our arms around what is really quite a mass amount of content across government today, and help us to understand where there might be opportunities to better consolidate content. And then lastly, help us to put systems in place to make it easier to manage that content on an ongoing basis and keep content up to date. Next up, we've got design. You've heard a lot already about the US Web Design System, but I just want to foot stomp how important it is that we are looking to that as a resource. And the other part of design is we have to be mobile first. Over 55% of visits to government websites today are occurring via mobile devices. That is where the public is at. That is how we have to serve them. And so, our ask here is, don't build us bespoke websites. Start with the design system, build out from that, and help us get to that more consistent experience across government. And again, on mobile, start with mobile. Don't let it be an afterthought. Show your clients mobile designs and interactions, and help keep that front and center. Next up, we've got search. Two things that the guidance both reinforces the requirement to have an on-site search function for the majority of websites, as well as to follow a number of SEO-related best practices. And what we'd ask for here is, help us put systems in place that tackle SEO as part of routine content management, so that we're doing everything in our power to ensure that the best resources, the best answers are showing up in search results. And then, to the point of this ever-evolving technology landscape, help us plan for a future when users are increasingly turning to emerging technologies like artificial intelligence or social media platforms to find information or to find answers to their questions. Help us plan for what the digital content of the future needs to look like across government. And then lastly, digitization. This is really the bedrock for so much of this work. The guidance calls for digital options, both complete and sign forms, as well as self-service options for common tasks. And something that is, I think, really, really important here is we don't want to just digitize an existing and perhaps inefficient analog process. Every digitization effort is really an opportunity to transform the user experience and ultimately reduce the burden that is placed on the public. And also the burden that is potentially placed on the federal workforce. So as we think about digitization, think about guided interactions, think about structured data. Don't think about just having fillable PDFs online. And lastly, once we're able to collect inputs digitally, let's make sure that we keep those digital end to end so that we are able to truly reap the benefits that digitization can bring, both from a service delivery perspective, but also from an efficiency perspective.
And if you're just coming back in after the pause that we just had, again, apologies to everybody about that. Had a little bit of a technical snafu. We think we've got it figured out at this point. We're just confirming that we've got all the folks for our first panel. So as soon as we can confirm that everybody's back in, we'll get restarted. Thanks again for everybody's patience on this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adaya. So it does look like we have everyone back for our first panel. And so just as a quick reminder, both segments of this event are being recorded and were recorded, and we will be sharing a link to the recording with you via email once it is available to us. Now, that said, I'm going to hand things off to Jennifer Rastami, who is the Assistant Commissioner for the Technology Transformation Services Consulting within GSA, and she's going to be our moderator for panel one. So Jennifer, please take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. I am going to, so originally I have this all-star panel that we have today for this next session, and we're going to try to keep it on time. So I'm going to run through our intros. First up, we've got Gary Washington. Gary and I have had the pleasure of working together. He's also the U.S. Department of Agriculture's CIO. He leads their IT modernization initiatives, and he's transforming the department into an evidence-based, data-driven, user-focused organization. So welcome, Gary. Next up, we've got Doug Freeman. Also a pleasure to know Doug. He is the Director of Digital Customer Experience for the U.S. Department of Commerce and serves as the agency's digital delivery lead and representative on the Federal Digital Experience Council. Doug brings more than 30 years of experience leading digital transformation in both public and private sectors. Welcome, Doug. Next up, we've got Erica Nudi. Erica is the Senior Advisor for Digital Transformation at the Office of Personnel and Management. Prior to joining OPM, Erica has served as Strategic Communications Director and Consultant both in the public and private sectors. Welcome, Erica. And finally, we've got Larry Bufundo. Larry, a colleague of mine, is acting Executive Director for GSA's Technology Modernization Fund, which many of you know as it crosses across government. Prior to joining the TMF, he led modernization at the Department of Labor, building an in-house cross-functional team of digital experts drawn for both public and private sectors. So I want to welcome this panel today. And we're going to just jump right into it to keep us on a good time schedule. So to start us off, and I'm going to call on two of the folks on the panel here, Doug and Erica. Would you mind starting us off and talk a little bit briefly about where you currently stand in your digital modernization journey? What are some of the key initiatives and milestones that you're focusing on next?
Do you want to go first,
Erica? Yeah, go ahead, Erica. You bet.
Well, so OPM is pretty early on in our transition to our kind of digital first model. The first major project that we're doing right now is we are rebuilding and kind of not just the CMS and the backend, but we're also rebuilding our content around our flagship site, OPM.gov. And then we are kind of using this project to reset our digital ecosystem and also kind of be an anchor that all of our other sites can pull into. And we're hoping that it will kind of leapfrog us into the compliance that we wish we were currently at, but we are not quite there yet. So we're also looking at our internal structures. Do we have the right talent? Do we have the right governance structures? How do we support this kind of new model? Because the way we want to do things is not necessarily how we are doing them right now, right? It's not enough to just digitize a process, to just like put it in digital. We have to kind of look at the whole systems and all the things around it to make sure that it supports a new way of working, a new way of budgeting, a new way of staffing. So that's another kind of less splashy, but incredibly important process that we're going through as well. We're going to be launching a public preview, an MVP of the new site this fall, featuring content that's designed specifically for federal employees. And then we're going to launch the new site fully in the spring of 2025.
And hey, piggybacking on our last questions from, is it mobile first?
Yes.
That's great.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that was actually one of the things that we really struggled with before, kind of the old structure. But when the beauty of starting and rebuilding from scratch is that you get to actually design mobile first the first time.
Great. Well, Eric, I'll go ahead and jump in then just real quick. Yeah, so I think for us, I would just say it's a particularly exciting stage for DX at Commerce. We have several bureaus who are designated as high impact service providers. That's bureaus like Census, USPTO, International Trade Administration, well-known bureaus who actually have been working for several years now on improving digital and customer experience with a focus on critical designated services. So services that we know are highly trafficked, critically important to users and to customers. And in fact, I won't even elaborate. I'll just encourage all of you to keep up with their progress at performance.gov. So go out to performance.gov and you can keep up with that effort. And so that's a great effort that's underway. But we also have other high impact digital experiences at Commerce that have either recently been redesigned or are being redesigned as we speak. And excitingly, you heard sort of Claire mentioned this earlier, which was leveraging best practice human-centered design approaches. And that's really critical to us now. And so that includes, for instance, the website for BIS, a bureau that's playing a pivotal role in AI now today, for those that are keeping up with that. And then for NOAA, with their primary site, which is weather.gov, obviously one of our most visited sites at Commerce. And so two really great efforts there. And I think just two other things I would add, which is obviously with the introduction of OMB's memorandum M2322 last fall, we're really excited to be collaborating with other executive agencies as part of that new Federal Digital Experience Council. So as we develop standardized digital experience measurements, particularly we are particularly passionate about standardizing those measurements around customer satisfaction. So what's the voice of the customer? What do our customers really feel about what we're delivering in terms of digital experience? But also as we share sort of and apply success stories around governance, updating policies, leveraging shared services. And then kind of the final note I'd throw out there is at Commerce, we're also excited about we really have a methodical and safe process that we're using to innovate select AI pilot projects to advance our mission and really explore new ways to obviously advance digital experiences. So that's kind of on obviously the next frontier, but we're really excited about a lot of those pilot projects that are going on right now. So Jennifer, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Doug. I'm going to bump us into the next question here. What are the primary drivers behind your agency's digital modernization efforts? And for this, I would like to hear from Gary and Larry first. Are there specific challenges or pain points that you're addressing through your initiatives?
So some of the drivers for USDA is obviously, I mean, we have customers that we count across the United States. And we have many offices, and we serve as farmers, ranchers, scientists, statisticians, foresters. So, improving the customer experience through technology is very, very important to us. And making sure that people can access our services online through a digitized experience is paramount in the modern world. In addition to that, another driver is being able to measure the improvement of the increased satisfaction of our customers to be able to do that. But along with all of that comes, creating a workforce that can support that kind of environment and work in that kind of environment as well. So we have strategies around doing that as well. And we hope that through all of these efforts, it will decrease our technical debt and assist us in replacing some of our legacy technology and provide a more modern environment for us to operate. Some of the challenges that we have, obviously investment is a challenge, but we need to work with our workforce to get all of us to a point where we can, operate and manage these new environments well, and to be able to service the public in the best way possible. I'll turn over to him.
Thanks, Gary. So obviously the Technology Modernization Fund brings a little bit different of a perspective. We're not a specific agency. So I'm going to talk a bit about what we're seeing across the investment portfolio, which we think to some extent is representative of trends across government as a whole. So there's really 4 key drivers that we're seeing in terms of the types of inquiries and proposals that the TMF receives around modernization. So the first is around just responding to increasing public expectations. So people expect more from government digital services. They can manage most aspects of their lives online. They expect similar experiences with government. In addition to that, agencies like Gary's and others are well on their way to maturing their own digital practices. Many of them now have customer experience teams and programs in place. So we're seeing just a lot of activity on that front. The second driver is around cybersecurity. We live in a rapidly changing threat landscape where the risks are changing constantly. In addition to that, we have very clear executive orders and standards that the federal government is moving towards, particularly on the cybersecurity front and in terms of achieving a zero trust posture across the federal government, with many of those objectives, agencies being held accountable to at the end of 2024. So there's a big push there as well. The third big driver is around harnessing emerging technology, in particular artificial intelligence, which should come as no surprise. AI in particular generative AI holds a lot of promise for modernization efforts across the federal government, as agencies are looking to leverage those tools to streamline workflows, drive efficiency, and ultimately improve service delivery. But this also comes with needing to put effective governance and risk management frameworks in place to harness that technology and mature it effectively. And the fourth area is a bit broad, but I would just categorize as transformation. And Gary talked a little bit about this as well. As agencies are thinking about more of a digital first footing and public experience, they also need to be rethinking technology and processes, some of which are designed back in the 1950s. And so that takes a lot of change management and reorientation in order to accomplish, as well as retiring legacy systems. There are very few greenfield projects in the federal government. Most often people are building on top of the past or are in some ways constrained by the legacy tools and environment that they're working in. And so that's a big challenge for agencies. And just to wrap up, some additional challenges that we're seeing in and around agencies that the Technology Modernization Fund helps address. One, I think also shouldn't be a surprise, which is around budget. So it's a difficult budget environment. It can make long-term capital planning difficult, as well as long-term IT modernization strategy challenging to put in place. In addition to that, some agencies are now asked to do a lot more with less. And so TMF provides flexible funding to those agencies really at the speed of need to both jumpstart and sustain some of these new ideas. The second challenge that we're seeing and talk a lot about with agencies through our proposal process is just the cost of change. And again, as I mentioned, about the fact that many agencies are having to work through the constraints of legacy systems and environments, and figuring out how to do that in the context of accomplishing modernization goals remains a key challenge. TMF tries to enable this by focusing on shared services, promoting the reuse of software and best practices, so that federal agencies don't need to build as much on their own, and can also learn from each other and other individuals that have accomplished these goals successfully. And the third challenge is really around just organizational capacity. A lot of these efforts are not just technology problems. They require leadership as well as modern skills, tools, and practices within the organization to be successful. And at TMF, we work directly with agencies, not just through the proposal process, but through the life cycle of the investment and provide technical assistance and guidance to help individuals think through the best approaches and also tap a network of individuals that have done that thing successfully in their environment and learn from them.
I want to skip a little bit ahead, given that, this is an industry day, and some of everything that everyone's been talking about couldn't have been accomplished without industry. And so I would like actually, Larry, if you could share a couple of examples of successful collaborations that you've experienced with industry that, to help, bridge digital divide.
Sure, yeah. And I think that Jenny, I'm going to approach this in a little bit differently than some of the other panelists as well, just considering that TMF looks across the federal government. So TMF doesn't really work or interact directly with vendors. We're primarily working with agencies, but we recognize that vendors play a really key role in the GovTech digital ecosystem. And so there's a couple of things that vendors can do, similar to some of the ideas that Jonathan Finch was outlining on the policy front, to help supercharge agency efforts given this ecosystem. One is helping agencies identify and leverage the Technology Modernization Fund as a resource for their modernization goals. There's information on our website that vendors can leverage and use to put in front of their agency partners and help them think through how can TMF be a solution for them given their needs. And the second area, and again, I think just maps back to some of what Jonathan was saying in the earlier part of the day, is helping agencies ultimately build and install these foundational capabilities to meet the OMB guidance that we're talking about today, particularly the 21st Century IDEA Act, and what it means to enable a digital first posture. And as I said before, like, this isn't just about functionality and delivering functionality. It's also about installing new skill sets and frameworks, in particular, a product mindset that helps agencies and organizations think more in terms of outcomes. And in doing so, helping agencies also think about defining baselines, designing effective feedback loops, and then ultimately being able to measure success. But in a lot of cases, when we're working with partners at the TMF, many of them don't have these baselines in place. And so that can make an iterative and evidence-driven approach challenging. And so that's really step one and part of this broader shift that vendors can help enable.
Great. Doug, I'd like to come back to you on this question of, can you elaborate on the key needs and requirements of your agency that you've identified to support digital modernization efforts? What resources, tools, or support from industry are essential for your success?
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it short. I mean, I think Jonathan did a great job, I think earlier, touching on kind of the needs across all the various policy components of M2322, kind of going category by category again. Great job by Jonathan. And I think, as we, I guess I'll list off a few specific areas I think that they're of particular note for us. I think before I do that, again, I think I want to sort of sound the bell on, again, kind of voice of the customer and customer satisfaction, because I think as we standardize measurement around that, and we go through a culture change, we go through the change management, the mindset change that gets us all really super focused on that, that will actually be the thing that brings it even into sharper focus, the prioritized needs for, each website, and in particular our highest traffic sites, and in turn that'll obviously drive the variety of needs for resources, tools, and support, right, based on what our customers are telling us we need to improve. But I think, for us, there's a few areas that really stand prior to that stand out. One, of course, is tools and resources that help us deeply engage with the voice of the customer. Right. You can't stop with the voice of the customer, just one simple question in an open text box. You got to dig deeper across a variety of data sets and be able to distill all of that data into a true understanding of the voice of the customer. So analytics, real-time testing, longitudinal studies, how do you gather all that, bring it in, measure it, distill it together, triangulate it all, and come out with a true understanding of the voice of the customer? That's central for us. I think support in the areas of human-centered design. So Claire touched on how important that is and the basis of what we do. That's really the center of the 21st Century IDEA Act. And so I think that includes everything from support for cultural change to training, expert resources, and then obviously all the associated tools and platforms that go along with that. I think a couple of final areas would be obviously in the support in the area of accessibility, right? So monitoring, reporting, addressing those issues. That's still we have a big hurdle to really get where we want to get to with accessibility. So there's a lot of work. We have a lot of expertise. but obviously need even more help to really, I think, ultimately get over that hump. And then I'd say the last piece is just resources and support in helping refine our governance efforts. We're not unlike any sort of large, complex organizations. It's not unheard of, right, to be challenged around sort of governance. How do you collaborate effectively and efficiently in a large, complex organization? How do you smartly leverage shared services? And so I think the support and the resources to help us understand how to do that best can have a really big impact. So back to you, Jennifer.
So something key that I hear you mention is the importance of the data. So I'd like to talk a little bit about data some more. So Gary, I'd like to have you answer this question, and Erica, I'd like to hear, from both of your experiences. What role does data play in your agency's digital modernization efforts, and how are you leveraging data analytics and insights to drive decision making and improve services?
Data plays a huge role.
Oh, we lost your audio, Gary. Faintly.
Is that better?
Yeah.
We've been on this data journey for the last 5 or 6 years, and USDA has gotten to a point where our leadership uses data to make informed decisions, and we have implemented this enterprise data platform upon which we share data across USDA from various agencies. And in terms of how it helps with our modernization, we asking different questions and assessing different data sets, we can determine, especially financially, and prioritize, how we're going to go about our digitization journey. And, what, sets of criteria for determining the amount of investment we want to put into that as well. So, with that, we've established using data, being able to use data, and it's important that we get data from the same sources, because that's always an issue, because you can ask 10 people the same question. If they get it from a different data set, you might get a different answer. So, I'm not going to say we're fully there, but we're transitioning to a point where we're getting data from the same data sources so that we can make sound, consistent, evidence-based decisions using this data, so that we can thoughtfully plan out our digitalization journey here at USDA.
Erica.
Data is the center of, I would say, I don't know, maybe 80% of our conversations at OPM around modernization. And one of the major kind of reasons for this is that OPM is the largest receiver of workforce data, definitely in the country, probably, we come up with another great superlative for it, but we have a large data set available to us. And so, and I always say, like, we are incumbent, by the fact that we are taking federal employees' data to be creative and to be doing mindful analysis of that and using that data to leverage both better benefits, better policy, to basically benefit the people whose data we're working with. But then there's also this component of, like, how do we use data to improve the way that we do business? And all of these questions and all of these kind of guiding principles, from like top to bottom, everything we do, we want data at the center, but that requires builds that are flexible, that requires security. And a lot of the vendors and stuff that we work with, sometimes, certain security processes don't necessarily match with another, or, making sure that the data can talk to itself. And there's also kind of the kind of core components of that should be built that are strong, secure, that talk to each other, that allow us to have data sets that work with each other. We need to make sure that those kind of like pillar pieces, agnostic to technology or what may come in 5 to 10 years with AI, that we have good, central data columns, that they are secure, that the kind of basic components are being built in a way that allow us to kind of be prepared for the future, because these are large, expensive projects with large security bills that come with them. And talking about kind of legacy systems, and Larry mentioned that a little bit, it's not, particularly with a budget crunch, it's hard to pay for two systems, which is what you have to do when you are standing up one and trying to sunset another. So you're paying for double, kind of like double the services and double the tech at that point. So there's a lot of considerations and a lot of places for partnership with industry for these solutions, but making sure that we're building stuff that work with other products, that talk to other products. But I also agree with Doug that we need help on the front end and how to use data for, to research and really understand our customers and how people are making decisions and how people are moving through our sites, so that we can make sure that we're using not just developing and designing services that work for them, but that we're also using data to be, if we're going to take people's data, let's do something good with it that they can benefit from. So I think this is we're all thinking about AI, but all of these new innovations are only as good as the data that that's going to be fed into them. So I think we all have a lot of need to really be assessing our data, the security again, the quality of it. We're going through a big overhaul to look at how we're collecting data from agencies, and then visualizations. How do we, if we're going to be superpowering data, how do we help within our agencies visualization so people can use the data to make better decisions? People are visual learners, so you can't just send them an Excel spreadsheet and be like, make better decisions, right? Like we need to kind of help use the data to tell stories, and so that's gonna require additional tools as well. And they do have to be 508 conformant. That is a huge challenge right now. There's a lot of things that in a vacuum are 508 conformant, but when they interact with other pieces of the websites or with other technology we use, they are no longer 508 conformant. So we really need partnership and people to understand how we use the technology and the tools, how they interact with our systems, because right now we're struggling to make sure they're conformant.
So a theme I want to pick up on, something that everybody has mentioned in different ways, is talent. So we just talked a lot about the data and analytics talent that's needed. I heard earlier, Doug, you were talking about the CX talent. Gary, you were talking about the workforce transitioning into CX. Accessibility was mentioned. These are, frankly, some of them are very new talent sets to the federal government. So I would actually like to open this to the whole panel and see, who's got thoughts and wants to share first on this. But how are you approaching the talent and skills gap with digital transformation in your agency? Are there specific strategies or programs you have in place to upskill your workforce?
I'll start. So we created an office, one called the Digital Services Office here in OCIO and USDA. And one of the primary focuses of that is to set up programs where we can recruit talent to help us with our digital journey. And not just that, but our current workforce to help provide the tools to assist them to be able to be productive in this new environment that we're envisioning. And that's the complete alignment. We have a IT workforce strategy that we work with our Chico in the USDA. And also it's outlined in our USDA IT strategic plan as well. It is a priority goal around preparing our workforce for the 21st century. So, we're taking advantage of all of the available direct hiring authorities, fellowship programs, partnering with universities. We've recently been to State University and had a data hackathon around Meet Marble and the USDA. So, our next frontier is really getting our arms around how do you prepare people for AI, for artificial intelligence. So what does that professional really look like moving forward, and what skill sets are required for that kind of professional to be successful in this agency or across the federal government. So, Ariane Gallagher leads our digital services office, and she's been very effective, her and Fatima, and we made a lot of strides in those areas.
Great. Would anyone else like to talk about how you're approaching your workforce and
I'll jump in.
yeah.
So I think part of this is also recognizing what needs to be brought in-house. There are certain positions and certain skills that that just don't work as well with a contract team. There's still some inflexibility with contracts. Some skills need to have like a bank in-house, not only to be, flexible and kind of guiding some of these decisions, but also kind of gut checking the work and guiding the work from contractors. So there's people that need to come in that we don't have yet at OPM. And some of it is just, we need people with the judgment and perspective that can only come over time, and time takes time. We need people who have tried things and failed, who have perspective of what it's like to under budget a project and see what happens when when you try to do it on the cheap and what the consequences are. And we need them on those teams doing our budgeting and planning, right? So we need this not just in terms of technologists, but we need it across a lot of the support functions. So someone mentioned HR, right? We need people who can hire, who know how to recruit, who know what the competitive landscape looks like, what are the benefits that we can provide as a federal workplace that makes us competitive with the private sector. It ain't going to be salary, but it can be things like flexibility. And there's lots of different, there's other things that we can offer. So we need we need HR that's strong and aggressive and used to working in this talent pool. We also need more people who can do budgeting and appropriate scoping and cross-functional teams. We need managers that know how to manage, not just to make sure that our people are doing their jobs, but so that we're providing career paths and mentorship so that when we have good talent, we can keep them in the federal workforce and that we aren't losing them to private sector. There's a lot of benefits to early career talent. There's certain direct hire authorities, there's internships and other feeder mechanisms. These are people that are native, but they aren't going to stay, and we aren't going to be able to make the most use of early career talent if we don't have a pipeline for mentorship, for community, and for support to help people grow their careers. So that's a lot of really important stuff. And then because our agency is small and because we lack a lot of skills, we're getting creative with how we're pulling people in. So I'll use the example of, we have someone who's been staffing the CHICO Council, which is the Council of Chief Human Resource Officers. She is leading up our project to redesign how we receive data from agencies, because she's been literally sending out the data calls to agency human resource officers. So she knows, the phone calls that she gets, what are the troubles, what are the sticking points, what are the challenges that the people who are, sending us the data, what are they facing? And so we've moved her into this project. Does not have a typical, technology background, but her perspective on the customer is invaluable. So that's going to help us kind of replace some of that user research functionality, but we can then build around that as a base. So we're getting creative as to how we're staffing projects and where we're bringing expertise in. But we do need to hire. And so I'm working on a plan right now for a 3-year staffing plan. So ask me in 1, 2, and 3 years how well it goes. But we want to make sure that when we bring in those people, that they're coming into an environment where they can be successful and can support the new skill set.
That's really interesting, because what I'm hearing is it's not just about the technologists. It's about the folks that can offer their SME experience in different settings, and somehow everybody gets a bit of cross-training through that experience. That's really cool. Okay, well, I want to take a minute to just look ahead now. So what are some of the key priorities or milestones that your agency aims to achieve in its digital modernization journey over the next few years? And Gary, I'll pass this one to you, and I'd like to open it up to any of the panel to round us out on this question.
We have 5 tech service providers. One of the milestones is actually to digitize and get those totally digitized as we promote. What we're very proud of that we've accomplished to this point recently is our implementation of farm loans in all our farms. Which was a big deal to us. We have we have 4 different other missionaries that are on their digital journey as well. Another milestone of ours is to, methodically, upgrade certain parts of our workforce, and get them skilled to the point where, they have more of an interest in the digital journey versus the traditional way of servicing information technology. Can you hear? Because I heard somebody say that they had to speak up because they couldn't hear me, so I'm trying to speak louder. And we're trying to become very much more mature in tying our digital journey to strategically what we want USDA to look like in the future through digitalization, and making sure that it's very clear how we're going to improve our services to the American public and the role that the digital experience has as well. So it's some very exciting times here at USDA in terms of modernizing this diversity of missions that we have across the department. So I'm very excited about it.
Thank you, Gary. Would anyone else like to share, what's ahead for you?
For us, it's our new website and kind of rebuild of the flagship. I mentioned before, we're building it to be kind of like the mothership. So we're going to be consolidating and moving more of our sites in to that, and under that umbrella, and kind of both for streamlining of content purposes, but also to give us a really strong base to be streamlining our customer services, right? As a lot of people, my fellow panelists, as federal employees, that it's quite a fragmented experience from hire to retire currently. But if we have this strong base, we can look at the interactions of the different services and see some of the ways that we can start to smooth that out. There's a lot of stuff that can be done that isn't necessarily on the back end and reimagining processes, but just start from some basic design principles, and kind of content mapping and architecture can help really improve users' experiences. So we're gonna get this hub, we're gonna launch this, and we're gonna start from this kind of this anchor. And then we're also looking at major, like I mentioned before, kind of pillar projects. What are those kind of stakes that you need to have in the ground, no matter what the technology is, for 5 years, from 10 years from now? They're not necessarily sexy projects, but sometimes you just need like a really good digital file service and system to collect files. You need some of these basic pieces that help you process payments. And we need to make sure that we're modernizing those, because we're going to need that no matter what we build in 5 to 10 years. And we certainly don't want to be doing it on a system that was built 30 years ago.
That's right. And that sounds like part of the journey that USDA has been through with modernizing that farm loans process. And it really is starting simple. So I want to thank each and every one of you, Gary, Doug, Erica, and Larry, for joining on today's panel. Appreciate the thoughts and insights and your expertise on modernization here. And Giovanni, I will toss it back to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we're going to transition to our second panel of speakers, who are going to share insights and lessons learned after implementing DX programs and acquiring the technologies to support them. And now I'm going to hand things off to Jessica Marine, who is GSA's Digital Experience Delivery Lead, and she is going to be our moderator for the second panel. Jessica, over to you.
Thanks, Giovanni. I want to just check really quickly that my audio sounds okay. Okay, perfect. I was having a little issues yesterday. I wanted to make sure we were good to go. Thank you. The panel that just wrapped up was forward-looking, focused on where they are on their digital journey and how they're prioritizing this work. This panel is going to be a little bit more retrospective, sharing some lessons learned. And now the legal disclaimer. Because we'll be talking about past experiences, if any of our panelists mention a specific company or vendor that they've worked with, this does not constitute an endorsement of that vendor. End of legal disclaimer. So now let's get to the good stuff. So if I could have Abby, Mark, Florence, and Ashley come on screen, I'll do a little bit of introductions and then we'll get into our Q&A. All right, Florence. There you are. First, we have Abby Bowman as NASA's Web Modernization Lead. Abby oversees the agency's efforts to consolidate its public websites into a unified, world-class web experience, launching the agency's new flagship platform last fall. Abby also serves as the co-lead of the new Federal Digital Experience Council. Welcome, Abby. Next, we have Mark Junda, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. He is the deputy for the health delivery portfolio within the VA's Chief Technology Office. Mark has 20 years of experience in tech acquisitions and digital service delivery, and the majority of which was advancing the VA's modernization efforts. Welcome, Mark. Next, we have Florence Kasul. Florence is the procurement director at the U.S. Digital Service, bringing more than 15 years of procurement innovation experience. Florence is a tech acquisition strategist and a self-proclaimed nerd, bureaucracy slayer, and hacker, with experience in both the defense and civil government sectors. Welcome, Florence. And next we have Ashley Owens. She's a senior digital acquisition strategist on the GSA service delivery team. Ashley specializes in applying agile methods to the federal procurement process to de-risk tech procurements, creating higher post-award value and user satisfaction. Ashley is known for her real talk to the clients she supports, shifting the focus to user experience and embracing agile techniques while keeping everything within regulations and having fun in the process. Welcome, Ashley. All right, being mindful of time, I'm going to kick us right into the questions. We're going to follow a similar pattern as the last panel, where I ask a question and a couple panelists will answer it, and folks can feel free to chime in if you have anything to add. So let's kick it off by discussing some of the successful digital modernization initiatives within your agency. I think I'm going to lean on Abby first. Could you highlight a specific project or strategy that involved industry that has worked particularly well at NASA and explain why?
Absolutely. So actually at NASA, we kicked off our web modernization journey 5 years ago. So shortly after the passage of the IDEA Act, our administrator at the time, Administrator Bridenstine, saw the change that was coming, right? Saw the direction Congress was pushing us and said, we need to do something. We had, I think at the time, the third largest footprint of any federal government agency. And we're not HHS or VA, right? Who have all of these um, different hospitals and locations across the country, right? We're here to share incredible science with the world. But part of having a lot of very smart scientists in your agency means they're all capable of standing up their own websites. So having been on the web for decades, right, we had, I think when we started, we had over 4,000 external facing domains, not all of which were websites, but it was a very big footprint to even understand what websites were out there, right? Much less, okay, now what is our strategy to start streamlining and modernizing? So starting back in 2019, the administrator actually created basically a tiger team under the chief scientist at the time, Dr. Jim Green, and said, this is all hands on deck, all across the agency, whether you're from the CIO shop, the comm shop, the science mission directorate, every mission directorate and center. We're coming together and we're going to figure out how to solve this. And so our industry partners were a really key part of our success in that area. And we were working kind of initially with a UX firm to do a really intensive audit of our footprint, qualitative and quantitative user research with the public, designing a new design system based on the US web design system, and then selecting a new CMS, starting to build the CMS, and eventually last fall launching the new NASA.gov. And I think I'll hit these really quick because I think I'll come back to them later in the panel. But I think two kind of top line reasons come to mind for why we've been successful so far. We're not done. We have a long way to go still. But number one, I think, has been because with our different industry partners and with our partners across NASA, from day one, it's really been conceived as an agency-wide effort where everyone is there with their hat on as the public advocate and the hat on for what is best for NASA as an agency, not for my piece of NASA. And I think I don't know if this is more unique among government agencies, but people can be pretty competitive within NASA, right? Like I want my mission to get the resources, right? I want to get the public attention. And so this was a little bit of a new way of us working together, of we're going to share a common goal, build a common platform together, and build something that truly works for anyone across the agency. Second reason I think we've been successful to date is because instead of all these different offices and missions across NASA investing separately to modernize individual websites, we kind of consolidated all this investment into one strong push to our two flagship websites, www.nasa.gov and science.nasa.gov. And every kind of effort is being channeled toward those two flagships as the modernization solution for the majority of NASA's websites. So we're really trying to do this in an effective way with our taxpayer dollars, and not by just kind of taking the long right. It's been 5 years. We're not rushing it, but we're also making sure that we are investing smart for the future in a sustainable way, so that each mission, right, can now devote their resources to unique functionality, right, that's unique to their science they're sharing with the public, instead of everyone funding the same base CMS functionality. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. No, I love that. The organizational buy-in, I think, is so key here, and I appreciate you pointing out how your industry partner was so helpful in navigating that. Florence, do you have a specific project or strategy that you can point to that's worked particularly well?
I certainly do. And thanks again for having me here, and seeing some familiar faces here as well. So when I started with USDS years ago, I was with the team at the VA. Hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder here, Mark. So we worked together in the past. The agency was working towards building a unified way for people to connect to the variety of services that the Department of Veteran Affairs offers. The result of that was the new VA.gov. But to get there, the contracts that were awarded when they were being in the ideation stage, what was baked deeply into them was user research. And that was something that a lot of digitization efforts that happened in the past, some just didn't have that baked directly into the contracts explicitly. And so what worked particularly well there was, since that was baked into the contracts, a deep focus on human-centered design principles were there from the beginning. There were a lot of stakeholders across the projects, and the focal point remained on the people we were serving: veterans, service members, caregivers, and family members. That translated into user research from the very beginning, even before those contracts were rolled out, because there were designers on site and within the team. Another thing that worked really well was something that Abby said, was buy-in across the board. And that buy-in was not only from within VA, but our industry partners, that we were one team working toward a very specific thing, an improved experience for the people that we were serving. And so that translated into daily stand-ups, check-ins. The feedback loops were consistent in terms of, like, if we needed to pivot, we were going to pivot, and the contracts were built in a flexible enough way for that to happen.
Since she brought up VA.gov, if I could just add to that a little bit, we've made a lot of great progress on VA.gov, and a great thing about it is, since it's a platform, we allow, it's a multi-vendor environment where vendors can come in and build applications on VA.gov, and it doesn't have to be just the same vendor. So we have a collaboration cycle so that vendor teams can build applications and deploy them on VA.gov. And just a little bit of what we're doing in the health portfolio is VA.gov is really seen as the place veterans can log into to view and manage their benefits, so they can apply for benefits and find out what benefits they're eligible for and whatnot. And so we're moving currently the patient portal, which veterans log into My Healthy Vet, and we're moving that functionality over to VA.gov to make that consistent experience. And we're kind of moving piece by piece over a period of time to deploy that on VA.gov. So still a lot of work to be done, but really neat what we're able to do on VA.gov.
Thanks, Mark. I love that modular approach, not having to do it all at once and having different vendors that can pop in. Something that's really resonating with me, Abby touched on it, so did Florence, and I heard a lot about it in the last panel, is the skill sets needed to do this work. And the ones that I'm hearing repeatedly are content strategists to help do content audits and information architecture, and then user experience researchers and designers. So I think, if industry's listening, those are the buzzwords that you need to have on staff, because that's what agencies are going to be looking for as they're navigating this new space. So just wanted to call that out. Okay, so we talked about some success stories. We know there's, on the flip side, every journey has its challenges. I think, Florence, I'm going to come back to you and ask you, can you share an example of a digital modernization that didn't go as planned? And if so, what were some of the key obstacles you encountered? What role was industry playing in that? And what did you learn from the experience?
Sure. So just a brief little disclaimer, when you're going through digitization efforts, not every one of them is going to be perfect, right? Like, I think everyone needs to give themselves the grace and the space to make the errors, but also give yourself the opportunity. And if you're writing contracts around these types of efforts, write them in a flexible enough way to pivot, right? So that it's not so rigid that you're now kind of hamstrung in that particular scenario. So years ago, I worked on a procurement focused on digitizing a major system that was both public and internal facing. We did extensive market research, industry days, and engagement, but never actually sat and met with the people using the system. The technicians in charge of working on it, the people who were going to benefit from the modernization outputs themselves. I can't go into a lot of detail with the exec system because of sensitivities around it. However, some of the key obstacles included the vendor and government teams not working towards building with the actual users in mind, right? Like, there were SMEs that were there that drafted the requirements documentation and were very well intentioned. I remember reviewing all of the documentation and saying, this is contractually sound, this is great, let's move out. But never did it address what the actual needs of the people were, who are going to be actually working on the digitized, modernized system. The team was singularly focused on addressing the requirements in the contract as they were written by and for the SMEs themselves. So how did that actually translate? Testing was difficult because the SMEs weren't actual users, so they didn't quite know or understand certain nuances of how the system worked pre-digitization effort and what the ideal state would be at the end. Industry was a willing thoughtful partner along the way. However, it would have helped to provide constructive feedback when it was known that there was this gap or blind spot. We heard of grumblings about it in the background, but that was never addressed in the Q&A, pre-solicitation, that was a gap for us. And we discussed it after the fact that, it would have been wonderful. Once the contract was awarded, industry partners did step forward and say, these are services that we can offer, but that was never addressed up front in the pre-solicitation phase, and we could have written that into the requirements themselves. I learned a lot from that experience, that if the memo M2322 existed back then, there are significant parts of it that we would have taken into consideration. Some of those center the humans and their experiences who are going to use the systems being digitized and modernized, right? Create feedback mechanisms for everyone on the team to provide timely input. For the acquisition professionals, be as involved as you can in the process to learn about what is being built and to be an active participant in the administration of those contracts. You're never gonna, as an acquisition professional, historically, we would catch the requirements, review, issue solicitations, award, and then step back and kind of watch the technologists or watch the program office work their magic with the contractors and industry partners. And in these types of efforts, those days are long gone. I strongly advocate for our procurement professionals, acquisition professionals, to be as involved as possible.
Thank you. And you said something that I want to pivot to and get into some real talk. How might the government improve the way contracts are written and structured for industry to better deliver on the goals of M2322 and digital modernization in general? Ashley, do you want to take the first crack at this question?
Sure. I want to stop everything Florence just said because she's speaking my language on cross-functional IPTs, including the acquisition professional, and creating a blameless culture so that folks can like thrive when they're trying to modernize and folks feel comfortable saying things that are wrong and pivoting. But I specialize in real talk, so I'll get into that. So the first thing I think we can do is we can write more plain language contracts. Like I'm speaking for myself, not the entire 1102 community here, but before I drank the Kool-Aid on Agile, I feel like my solicitations read like dissertations. And it's very hard to figure out what the government is trying to buy or what the government even needs help with in a solicitation when it's so many words that like aren't clear. So let's make it like plain language and easy to understand. And around that, a through line of all the panelists, even from our talks prior to the panelists, we're trying to make contracts more user-centered, more user-centered procurement processes on internally so that we are de-risking contracts for industry, but also making it really clear to industry, like what problem we're trying to solve so that they can offer us different outcomes. We're not necessarily saying we need a product or a service or like our administrator said, maybe it's a blend of those things, but they can't really offer that to us if we're not saying like, hey, this is clearly the problem we're trying to solve and making it really clear what our vision is and who our users are. So making it very clear in our contracts also who the users of the procurement are so that industry can offer us that innovation. And those to me are like some critical things we can do to structure our contracts along with what my colleagues have already said. Structure our contracts to be flexible. We always say we want to collaborate with industry, but the contracts aren't always structured in a manner to allow them for that collaboration. So even those structures, and I know a lot of us are doing things to put out, guides or templates and things like that that other agencies can use to structure their contracts that way. But those are some critical ways we could change things.
Thanks, Ashley. Mark, did you have some ideas here about how government contracts might be revamped?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with everything Ashley said. Something probably most of us on this call have been saying for a long time, but I don't think it's reached everywhere yet because I still meet with agencies that aren't quite doing this, is not writing specific technical and functional requirements into the contract. And again, I feel like, broken record, I say that every time I speak on one of these, but the moment you write them in, they're likely obsolete at that point. So really focusing a contract on the product vision and then hiring teams to come in and work towards that product vision. And you can give maybe some things from the backlog or epics to kind of give insight into the type of work that's going to be done, but really you want broad flexibility, broad scope so that teams can work to accomplish the product vision. I know for contracting professionals, sometimes it's tough to relent that list of requirements that makes you feel so safe, but that's never actually helped a contract. So we have to get over that myth. But a couple other things that we're starting to implement is as much as a lot of these modernization efforts have focused on delivering, web functionality, we're moving a lot to mobile app functionality, and more veterans are accomplishing tasks on the VA Health and Benefits mobile app. And so now when we're writing contracts, we're considering not just web development, but mobile development. Whereas previously we had kind of two different teams. We had our web delivery team, and then we had a mobile team that was kind of responsible for all things VA mobile. And what we realized was internally across VA that provided that ended with some friction, but also there was opportunity for inconsistent experiences when you have teams focusing on different things. So we're starting to align our contracts so that we can be focused on delivering an experience, no matter whether that's on web or mobile, but yet on the contract, those are very different skill sets. So trying to keep that in mind as you're proposing on efforts that you want to have both of those skill sets on the team. And then also structuring contracts around budgets. This is very often we'll share our first year budget going into the contract so that vendors kind of know the teaming size and how to scope it, but then also allowing for the contract to scale if you want to grow the teams. And there's been a lot of opportunity for that over the years with ARP money coming in and PACT money coming in, that we get this supplemental funding that we have to grow teams to accomplish more work, and the contract has to account for that. So you're not creating an entirely new contract, maybe even a different contractor wins and things get a little difficult. But also now we're kind of, the pendulum swinging into the opposite of that, into a more austere budget environment, so the contract even being able to kind of scale back a little bit. So those are some things we're trying to figure out how to accomplish, and hopefully we'll achieve.
Thanks, Mark. I know I personally, when I was managing a contract, I had enough flexibility to scale up to a second Scrum team as needed, and that was wildly valuable to me in delivering and meeting the user needs. So I
Yeah,
really appreciate that last point.
I've never been upset when I've had the opportunity to fund
Go
more
up.
money on a contract. So that's a principle to live by.
Florence, I know you had provided some information in the last question, but do you have anything here more to add about the way we're structuring contracts and how that might help industry better deliver on these goals?
Sure, and I'll be really brief because Ashley and Mark provided a lot of great information. To get tactical, the memo that dropped in September around delivering a digital first public experience, it's a 32-page document. For the procurement folks that are out there, I would focus on section 1 and section 3, delivering a digital first public experience, that goes through, that really talks about what we're talking about here today, including ensure that accessibility is written into the requirements from the beginning. And what does that mean? Using the US web design system, writing research directly into the contract as a requirement, requiring constant feedback loops. And what Mark said about do not write, basically don't bake things in from the beginning, not writing a strict plan or roadmap into your requirement, into your contract, because that just necessitates mod after mod after mod. That is expensive for the government. It's time consuming for industry, and it eventually creates a lot of churn. But the last piece that I'd add is we're talking about digitizing things, but in the memo itself, it shares that our audience is quite broad. Like Mark said, it might be that you're creating a new experience through a website, through mobile, or you might be keeping it analog, and so really addressing the needs of the people that you have as your audience and meeting them where they are and enhancing the experience to make it as seamless as possible in order for them to get the benefits, the services that they really need.
Thanks, Florence. And I think something I'll foot stomp here is that we really would love industry to read the memo. And especially when RFIs come out and we're asking for feedback from industry, point out things that might be missing that you think are relevant to the memo and to delivering this. Agencies are not going to be offended by that. So that's what I'll add there. Okay. Switching a little bit from contracting to collaboration. So collaboration is crucial in digital modernization efforts. Abby, I might come back to you and ask if you could share about a successful partnership or collaboration that you had and how it advanced your digital initiatives and what made that collaboration with industry so successful.
Absolutely. So two really good examples come to mind. I'll keep them short. But one was with that UX firm that we worked with on the user research and audit and development of our design system. That collaboration was kind of a multi-year, multi-engagement, like multi-activity process that kind of kept layering onto each other. So we kind of learn a lot through the audit phase, right? And use that to kind of set together what our goals were for the next phase of user research and so on, right? So giving ourselves, like you guys were talking about, not baking in the requirements from A to Z from the beginning, but giving ourselves that grace to say, we're going to learn so much from the audit, right? We're going to learn so much from this user research. We'll learn so much from the design system design that will then inform what CMS we select, right? So we really had to kind of take it step by step. And that the key, I think, how that was so successful was that our industry partner understood what I want to go back to. Erica said this on the last panel for OPM, right? That you can't just plop a spreadsheet in front of people and say, make better decisions, right? I loved that. You have to tell a story with the data to make change happen. And so that was exactly what this industry partner understood that NASA needed to change how we had done things. And so, especially with gathering all this data from the public, from all these surveys and one-on-one interviews, they really worked with us not just to come up with what the recommendations were based on the data. A lot of times those were not maybe surprising to our website teams, right, on the ground level. But they were radical changes, right, to leadership. And we needed that outside partner, that respected, right, external partner in their field to come in and help us tell that story to leadership with the data to back it up in order to move forward as an organization with those big changes. So that was critical, right? And that's not something I think that would have been much harder to accomplish with a purely like solely in-house team. I think the other collaboration I'm thinking happened quite a bit later, right? We're busily building the CMS, we're using WordPress, and we are partnering kind of with best in class vendors in that WordPress ecosystem. And so one example is a small company who specialized in WordPress accessibility. And so getting back to, I think someone was touching on this, where it is, we layered it kind of in several levels. So it was not just working with this company do manual intensive accessibility audits of the code we were developing. It was also how can we refine the tools that our editors have on the back end to check that their content is accessible, right? Their solution out of the box was kind of like maybe 90% of what we needed. We worked with them to fund the development of that extra 10% functionality, and made sure, baked in our contract with them, right, that it would become part of their free version of their module, so that anybody using that free plugin would have access to this new functionality that we had funded with taxpayer dollars. And then kind of as a third step, right, we asked them to zoom out. They're talking with all of these folks across NASA about accessibility. So we asked them, hey, give us an assessment, right? Walk us through where you think we are with our digital accessibility, especially around this new web platform. And what are your recommendations, kind of at the very like process and people level, how we can mature how we approach digital accessibility, right? So we took kind of what could have been a very transactional relationship, right, with an industry partner, and we really tried to approach it from both a strategy, right, tactical, and then future looking lens. So that's been really helpful when we have industry partners who like passionately believe in open source, right, and believe in serving the public. They're ecstatic to do this, right? Like it's a joy to work together, and it doesn't have that kind of sometimes confrontational aspect, right? Sometimes that contracts teams can get into. It's just it feels effortless. So that's kind of what I look for all of our industry partnerships of this. We're all driving so fast in this new direction to keep up. I don't have to be like looking over and trying to micromanage your steering wheel, right? We're all just flowing in traffic down in the same direction.
That's a great analogy. I love it. And if you've worked with a good vendor, you know exactly what Abby's talking about. So, um, Mark, do you have a success story about collaboration? And if so, what made that collaboration so successful?
Yeah, I think a bit of what Abby said of finding that right vendor base. And I think over the years, and I share this when I talk to people about our journey, is kind of cultivating that industry base and attracting them. That oftentimes as the government, we think if we solicit, there's a lot of vendors that want that money and they're going to propose, but like we're trying to bait that hook to get the right type of vendor that's interested in the work that we want to do and deliver in a very modern way. So we have to interact with industry to indicate that our intention, while we're definitely not perfect, is to deliver in a modern way so that we find the vendors that want to do that type of work and almost lead us in that, because often we might not know best practices all the time. So to get those types of vendors in, and I was talking to someone who works at a large commercial healthcare company. We were talking about accessibility, and he was saying how, oh, that's like less than a percent of our user base. Like we just don't need to focus on that. It's not worth it for us. And as the government, like we don't think that way, because those are American citizens that that we want to deliver services to. And so finding the companies that have that same understanding of accessibility, that they want to deliver that service to people that need it, and have those types of companies and collaborate with those companies. One example that I feel like we've been successful with is our CEDAR contract. It's our IDIQ that's just about coming up to ceiling now, and we're recompeting on a spruce. But it's been successful because I think we did find a handful of good companies that kind of have that similar culture. But we also interact with lots of companies outside of CEDAR that we found have that same culture. And so that continued collaboration, and even on things just, as we have relationships with vendors over many years, like we kind of evolve as an agency. And like I said, moving from, primarily focused on web delivery to mobile delivery, and having vendors that are willing to kind of look ahead with us and figure out ways to deliver that for us without us having to kind of shepherd that along, I think is really important. I think we've been fairly successful, always room for improvement, of course.
Excellent. We're running a little short on time, so I might skip ahead. And maybe Ashley, I'll ask you about kind of if you had to go back and look at your agency's digital modernization journey, what are some key lessons that you've learned along the way when engaging with industry, and what might you do differently if you could go back in time?
So many things, but just to foot stomp a lot of things said among the panelists. One is not starting with technical requirements. Like if I had a magic wand and could change anything about the procurement process in almost every procurement shop, it would be to not ask for requirements first, but to ask for product framing first, which is like just the problem they're trying to solve and the vision they have for the product. And I think if we started there, we could make all these procurements a lot more user-centered, a lot more flexible, a lot more focused on outcomes. Next is, everybody's touched on this too, you have to intersect contracting with UX. This world of delivering a digital first public experience doesn't happen without focus on the users, the public. And that including our, internal systems and products we use too. We have to focus these procurements on the users. And like I said, before I drink the Kool-Aid on Agile, I was like, most folks in like, okay, what are the requirements? And I'm just gonna go help you buy it. But we have to intersect those things, and we have to, like Florence said, have to include language that's very clear in our contract that we only want to do business with vendors who know how to do UX, because we need your help doing this user research and figuring out what our users need and knowing how to pivot throughout the contract, because the only thing that's going to be constant in government is change. And so we won't know everything, and we need your partnership to make sure we can go through these procurements in a nimble way. And I think the last thing I would say is I believe when we do write things this way and we do make it clear and we do focus on users, in my experience, industry steps up. A lot of the contracts where I maybe didn't have the best experience, again, in blameless culture, I can't say it was just industry, right? They're answering to the requirements that was written for them. And so if I had to go back, or things that I really try to focus on now is, when we write contracts in the right way, where it's focused on users and focused on that user need and just outcomes. I feel like industry meets us where we are, and we have like a beautiful partnership, just like others have described good collaboration that they've had with industry.
Thanks, Ashley. Abby, same question to you. If you had a magic wand, what would you go back and do differently?
I'll be really quick. Would not have picked, spent a year trying to pick a CMS. Would have done that much more quickly. CMSs rise and fall in less time than that. But two, I think we kind of structured our partnerships as this kind of block of UX work, right? And then a block of development work that flowed into now operating, right? And innovating on the new site. But there was kind of a very definite line where one stopped and the next began. And I think doing it over again, right? We'd still start the UX work earlier, but it would be kind of, right, more layered, overlapping streams of work there. We're really lucky, right, that we now have kind of a member of the team who's able to keep carrying through that UX work now as part of the contractor team, right? But for a while, that was a gap that we felt really strongly. So that'd be my advice to other folks: is bake in your UX budget right into your ops budget, and make sure that thread is there the entire way on into infinity, into your baseline budget.
That's great advice. I think this will be our last question, and maybe Mark, I'll come to you. Ashley brought up the ever-evolving nature of technology. How have you relied on industry to ensure that your digital infrastructure remains flexible and adaptable to future changes and advancement?
Yeah, I think partly it's modeling it after what commercial industry is doing. We decided to build our patient portal on VA.gov because we found that that was what one of the healthcare providers was doing. So there wasn't a disparate experience across different EHRs. So just modeling it after that. Also, we're building a clinical decision support platform that has connections into both of the EHRs, Vista and Oracle Health, and so we could, reuse those integrations to deploy a number of clinical decision support applications. So just, seeing the commercial marketplace build things like that reusable infrastructure and modeling it after that, and getting vendors in who are going to support that methodology and not see value to them in rebuilding the same thing over and over, but that will want to lead us in how to most efficiently and effectively, build infrastructure so it is reusable for things like that. And then also for the future, as we've been deploying these CDS applications, there's lots of opportunity to continue to deliver them at a lower cost. Also, it's a place to plug in different AI solutions since there's connections into the EHR. So there's opportunity for the future as well.
Thanks so much, Mark. And with that, I want to thank all of the panelists today. I think, the best predictor of success in the future is reflecting back on what we did well and what we didn't do well. And so we wanted to have this retrospective panel to give industry some insights into what has gone well for government, what hasn't gone well, and how you might be our partners moving forward. So Abby, Ashley, Florence, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. You guys were great, lots of great stories to share with industry. And with that, I will turn it back over to Giovanni. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. And I got to say, those are really, really insightful panel. And, technical challenges notwithstanding, I mean, I think this has been a really, really great event. We opened the day up with GSA Administrator Rodman Carnahan and the Federal CIO Claire Martirana talking about how great digital experiences are really critical to service delivery. We heard from Jonathan and OMB about the details of the 21st Century IDEA Act and how M2322 implements it. We had our first panel with leaders from across government all talking about how digital experiences are a strategic priority for agencies. And we just closed with our second panel of leaders who shared their experiences, insights, and lessons learned from actually implementing digital services or digital experience programs. And so really, I want to thank all the speakers who joined us today to share their wisdom and their ideas with us. As mentioned at the beginning of today's event, this is really a foundational event for us. It is the first in a series of conversations, and in the coming months, our goal is to continue this dialogue with agencies, industry, and all of our stakeholders in this space. The reality is that we barely scratched the surface on the next generation of digital experiences in this conversation alone, and we recognize that there is just really basic work to be done. We have to really adopt, widely proven standards, templates, and tools into our efforts. We have to prioritize our investments in technology and data to improve how members of the public experience the services we deliver as agencies. We have to align policies and budgets so that we can be smart about how we improve our digital services. And so in our follow-up events, we're going to go even deeper into how we make the federal digital experience simpler, more helpful, and more compelling for the people that we serve. You're going to hear more about how agency needs are changing and evolving within specific aspects of the digital experience. You're going to hear more about the challenges with acquiring and deploying the technology to support great DX and the solutions that are emerging in the space. You're going to see how federal policies and priorities around topics like accessibility and equity are driving us to rethink the digital tools we create. We also want to keep our antenna up for how technology is evolving. You heard briefly at the start of our conversation today about how Technologies like AI, connectivity, quantum computing are really pushing everyone to rethink digital services. And there's a great opportunity to provide greater security, greater ease in interactions, and more tailored information. We want to safely and securely experiment with new technology, especially if it has the potential to make it easier for the public to use the services the government provides. And so we have to provide ways for agency staff to discover these new efficiencies and effectiveness, but we also have to ensure that we mitigate potential risks of bias, discrimination, misinformation, and the loss of privacy. But the reality is that the government really needs a strong, healthy partnership with industry and other stakeholders to make all of this happen. And so we'll also want to hear from you. We want to know what new technologies are available and how we can best access them in a way that's safe and secure to better support DX. We've heard earlier today about some of the top priorities of DX: analytics, accessibility, brand, content, design, search, and digitization. We know about the importance of shared services and making our content really mobile friendly, and even basic tools like just e-signatures and identity. There's been recent policy like OMB M2408, which has focused on accessibility. And it's reasonable to expect that there will be even more policy guidance in the future that shapes the DX space even more. And of course, I think Ashley talked about this earlier, Jessica talked about this earlier. Acquisition is also a critical voice at the table. Contracting officers and specialists can help ensure that we have the right vehicles and the right process in place, but also be there at the right time. So they're asking the right questions and they're procuring the right solutions for the government's need. And so those are all the different areas that we're going to be focusing on in the upcoming sessions. And we will be posting announcements for future sessions on GSA's events page at gsa.gov/events. Again, that's gsa.gov/events. And as a reminder, we will be sharing the recording of this event once it is ready. With that, I will bring this to a close. Again, I want to thank all our panelists and speakers for sharing their experiences and expertise. And I really want to thank the team who made this happen today. We managed our way through a number of technical challenges, and here we are still pushing forward and having a great event. They really organized the panels, they planned the content, they handle all the logistics in the background. And most of all, I really want to thank, more than anyone, you folks are attending today, right? You made this all possible. We're here to have these conversations with you, and you grace us with your presence and attention, and we don't take it for granted, and we're incredibly grateful for you participating. And so with that said, I look forward to seeing you at our next session. Have a great day and hope to talk soon. Take care.